"You cannot seriously expect us to cook our own Thanksgiving dinner," my brother Kenneth shouted into the phone, his voice echoing through my quiet apartment in Portland, Oregon. I held the receiver away from my ear as his wife Patricia grabbed it from him. "Juliana, this is ridiculous. The whole family is counting on you. Grandmother Florence is coming all the way from Salem, and Uncle Vincent is bringing his new girlfriend. You can't just abandon us 3 days before Thanksgiving." I took a deep breath, looking around my peaceful kitchen, a space that for once wasn't covered in flour and turkey drippings during the holiday season. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm simply choosing not to spend my Thanksgiving slaving away in a kitchen while everyone else enjoys themselves. My name is Juliana Hayes, and I'm 42 years old. For nearly 20 years, I've been the unofficial and unpaid holiday chef for my entire extended family. While everyone else gathered in the living room, sharing stories and taking photos by the fireplace, I stood alone in the kitchen, preparing elaborate feasts for 15 to 20 people. This year, I decided enough was enough. The tradition started innocently when I was 23 and had just graduated from culinary school. My parents, Robert and Diana, had always struggled with cooking, so I offered to help with Christmas dinner. What began as a generous gesture slowly morphed into an expectation, then a demand. Every holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, even 4th of July barbecues, became my responsibility. "But who's going to make the herb-crusted turkey with the rosemary gravy?" Patricia continued, her voice reaching a pitch that could shatter wine glasses. "And what about your famous sweet potato casserole with the pecan topping? Uncle Vincent specifically requested it." I almost laughed. Uncle Vincent couldn't even remember my middle name, but he certainly remembered my sweet potato casserole. "Patricia, perhaps this is the perfect opportunity for you to learn some new skills in the kitchen. I have complete faith in your abilities." The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Neither Kenneth nor Patricia had ever prepared anything more complex than microwave popcorn for a family gathering. They had become so accustomed to my cooking that they genuinely believed they were incapable of preparing a holiday meal themselves. "This is completely selfish, Juliana," Kenneth said, taking the phone back. "Family comes first. You know how much these gatherings mean to Mom and Dad." His words stung because they held a grain of truth twisted into manipulation. These gatherings did mean everything to our parents, but only because they received all the credit for hosting while I did all the work. They basked in compliments about the wonderful meal while I scrubbed dishes until midnight, my feet aching and my back screaming from standing for 12 hours straight. Family does come first, Kenneth. That's exactly why I'm making this decision. Growing up, our family wasn't particularly close, but holidays had always been important to my parents. My father, Robert, worked as a manager at Creswell Electric, and my mother, Diana, taught elementary school. They prided themselves on maintaining family traditions, even though neither possessed any real cooking skills. Their idea of a home-cooked meal was frozen dinners heated in the oven. When I showed interest in cooking during high school, they encouraged it as a useful hobby. After I graduated from culinary school and started working as a pastry chef at North Peak Engineering's corporate cafeteria, they began hinting that I should contribute more to family gatherings. The first time I agreed to cook Thanksgiving dinner, my parents were thrilled. The praise was intoxicating. Relatives raved about the perfectly golden turkey, the silky, smooth mashed potatoes, the flaky buttermilk biscuits that practically melted in their mouths. But somewhere along the way, appreciation transformed into expectation. My parents stopped asking if I would cook and started telling people what I would be preparing. "Juliana's making her famous apple cider glazed ham this Easter," my mother would announce at church, as if it were already decided. "She has such a gift." The gift, apparently, came with invisible chains. Kenneth, 3 years older than me, had married Patricia 5 years ago. She was a marketing coordinator who considered herself quite sophisticated, often mentioning her college sorority days and her extensive knowledge of wine pairings. However, her culinary expertise extended only to making reservations at trendy restaurants. Kenneth worked in sales and spent most family gatherings discussing his latest commission checks and showing off photos from his recent vacation to Hawaii. My sister Patricia, yes, I had a sister-in-law and a sister with the same name, which created endless confusion at family events, was 2 years younger than me and worked as a dental hygienist. She had never shown any interest in cooking and seemed genuinely baffled by the concept of following a recipe. She would wander into the kitchen during my marathon cooking sessions, taste something, and offer unhelpful commentary like, needs more flavor, before disappearing back to the party. The breaking point came last Christmas, when I spent 18 hours preparing a feast for 22 people. I had started cooking at dawn, preparing homemade dinner rolls, a herb-crusted prime rib, roasted vegetables with balsamic glaze, 3 different desserts, and countless side dishes. While I worked, I could hear laughter and conversation from the living room, the clink of champagne glasses, and the camera clicks as everyone posed for family photos. When dinner was finally served, Uncle Vincent stood up to make a toast. "To Robert and Diana," he said, raising his glass, "for always hosting such magnificent holiday celebrations. You two really know how to bring the family together." I stood in the kitchen doorway, my apron stained with gravy and my hands raw from washing dishes, watching my parents accept praise for my work. That's when I realized I wasn't a family member at these gatherings. I was unpaid kitchen staff. Nobody noticed when I quietly slipped out the back door and drove home alone, leaving behind a kitchen full of dirty dishes and serving platters. The months following that Christmas revelation were eye-opening. I began paying attention to how my family interacted with me outside of holidays. Kenneth called me exactly twice, once to ask if I had a good recipe for chicken parmesan, because Patricia wanted to impress her book club, and once to inform me that they had volunteered me to cater their neighbor's birthday party. He seemed genuinely confused when I declined. My parents contacted me primarily to discuss upcoming holiday menus. My mother would call in early October to discuss Thanksgiving preparations, always phrasing her requests as questions while making it clear that no wasn't an acceptable answer. "You'll do your usual turkey with all the fixings, won't you, sweetheart? Everyone looks forward to it so much." I started keeping track of the financial cost of these holiday extravaganzas. Last Thanksgiving alone, I had spent nearly $800 on ingredients: organic turkey, fresh herbs, imported cheeses, premium wines for cooking, specialty fruits for the cranberry sauce. Not once had anyone offered to contribute financially. When I mentioned the cost to my father, he had laughed and said, "Well, you do eat the food too, Juliana. Consider it your contribution to the family." The emotional cost was even higher. I missed conversations with relatives I rarely saw, inside jokes that developed while I was trapped in the kitchen, and photo opportunities that captured family memories. I became the invisible engine that made holiday magic possible, while remaining excluded from the magic itself. My turning point came in early November, when my friend Beverly invited me to her family's Thanksgiving. Beverly was a fellow chef who understood the labor of love that went into holiday cooking. At her house, everyone contributed. Some brought side dishes, others helped with preparation, and the cooking was shared among several family members. I watched in amazement as Beverly's teenage daughter helped mash potatoes while her brother-in-law carved the turkey. The kitchen was full of laughter and conversation, not solitary labor. "This is what holiday cooking should feel like," Beverly told me as we worked side by side, preparing stuffing. "It's about bringing people together, not separating one person from the group." That evening, I made my decision. I would not be cooking Thanksgiving dinner this year. I would not be spending Christmas Day in isolation, preparing meals for people who saw me as a service provider rather than a family member. When I called my parents to inform them of my decision, my mother's first response wasn't concern for my well-being or curiosity about my reasons. It was panic about the menu. "But what will we serve? I don't know how to cook a turkey. We'll have to cancel Thanksgiving entirely." The fact that canceling Thanksgiving seemed more reasonable to her than learning to cook a turkey told me everything I needed to know about my role in this family. I was not irreplaceable as a person. I was irreplaceable as unpaid labor. As I hung up the phone after Kenneth's demanding call, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: excitement about the approaching holidays. The phone calls began intensifying as Thanksgiving approached. My parents tried guilt, manipulation, and outright begging. My mother left tearful voicemails about family traditions and how disappointed everyone would be. My father took a more practical approach, offering to reimburse me for groceries, a gesture that came about 18 years too late. "Juliana, I think there's been a misunderstanding," my mother said during one particularly desperate call. "We never expected you to cook alone. We just assumed you preferred it that way since you're so talented." The absurdity of this statement almost made me laugh. "Mom, in 20 years, has anyone ever offered to help me prepare holiday meals?" A long pause. "Well, we always offered to help with cleanup. Offering to scrape plates while I hand-wash crystal glasses and serving platters isn't exactly sharing the workload." Kenneth tried a different strategy, appearing at my apartment unannounced on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. He looked genuinely distressed, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and his expensive suit wrinkled. "Juliana, you have to understand the position you're putting us in," he said, pacing my living room. "I've already told my in-laws about your famous sweet potato casserole. Patricia's mother specifically asked about your cranberry orange sauce. How do I explain that you've decided to abandon the family? You could start by explaining that I haven't abandoned anyone. I've simply chosen to spend the holiday with people who appreciate my company rather than my cooking services." "That's not fair. We appreciate you." "When was the last time you and I had a conversation that didn't involve food preparation?" Kenneth opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. His expression shifted from indignation to confusion, as if he were genuinely trying to remember a non-food-related conversation and coming up empty. "See?" I said gently. "You view me as the family cook, not as your sister who happens to cook." Wednesday afternoon brought the most dramatic plea yet. My entire family, parents, Kenneth, Patricia, and my sister Patricia, showed up at my apartment building. I watched from my window as they stood on the sidewalk, looking up at my unit like carolers preparing to sing. My mother was holding a grocery bag, which she thrust at me when I finally answered the door. "We brought ingredients," she announced triumphantly. "If you're worried about the cost, we've taken care of it." I peered into the bag and had to suppress a laugh. They had purchased a frozen turkey, boxed stuffing mix, instant mashed potatoes, and canned cranberry sauce. The total cost couldn't have exceeded $30, a far cry from the hundreds I typically spent on fresh organic ingredients. "Mom, this is enough food for maybe 6 people. You're expecting 20. Well, we thought you could supplement it with some of your magic," she said hopefully. "My magic," I repeated slowly. "You mean my culinary training, my experience, my time, and my money?" Patricia, my sister-in-law, stepped forward. "Juliana, I think you're being a bit dramatic. It's just one day of cooking. How hard can it be?" This was the moment I realized they truly didn't understand what went into their holiday meals. They saw the final result, perfectly plated dishes appearing on schedule, but they had no comprehension of the planning, shopping, preparation, and execution required. "You're absolutely right, Patricia. It's just one day of cooking. I'm sure you'll manage beautifully." Thursday morning, I woke up in my quiet apartment and made myself a simple breakfast of scrambled eggs and coffee. For the first time in 2 decades, I wasn't setting my alarm for 5 a.m. to begin turkey preparation. Instead, I spent the morning reading a novel and taking a leisurely bath. At noon, I drove to Beverly's house, where her extended family was gathering for their collaborative Thanksgiving feast. I brought a bottle of wine and my famous apple tart, not because it was expected, but because I wanted to contribute to a celebration that valued my presence as much as my cooking. As I sat around Beverly's table, engaging in actual conversation and enjoying food I hadn't spent the entire day preparing alone, my phone began buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from my family. The first text arrived at 1:30 p.m. from Kenneth. The turkey isn't defrosting fast enough. How long did you usually defrost it? I deleted the message without responding. At 2:15 p.m., Patricia, my sister, called. Juliana, the oven temperature isn't making sense. The turkey package says 350 degrees. But shouldn't it be higher? Also, we can't figure out how to make the stuffing not mushy. I let it go to voicemail. By 3 p.m., the messages were arriving every few minutes. Photos of a still-frozen turkey. Panicked texts about side dish timing. A voice message from my father asking if I knew where my mother kept the good cooking thermometer, because the turkey looked kind of pink still. Beverly noticed my phone buzzing constantly. Family emergency? She asked with concern. Family education, I replied, turning my phone to silent. At Beverly's table, I was having the most relaxing Thanksgiving in years. Her family included me in conversations about travel, books, and current events. Nobody asked me about recipes or kitchen techniques. I was simply Juliana, the interesting woman who worked in culinary arts, not Juliana, the holiday meal production machine. When Beverly's nephew asked about my job, I found myself describing the creative aspects of menu development and the satisfaction of teaching cooking classes. I realized I hadn't talked about the intellectual and artistic sides of my career in years. My family only saw me as a source of holiday labor, not as a professional with expertise and passion. Meanwhile, 20 miles away in Beaverton, my family was discovering what Thanksgiving preparation actually entailed. Based on the messages I wasn't reading, their carefully orchestrated holiday was collapsing into chaos. At 4 p.m., I received a call from Uncle Vincent. Juliana, your mother is crying in the kitchen. Something about the turkey being raw and the potatoes being lumpy. Patricia, your sister, burned the green bean casserole. Your brother is on the phone trying to find a restaurant that's still open. Can you please come help us? Uncle Vincent, I'm spending Thanksgiving with friends who appreciate my company. I hope you all figure out a solution that works for everyone. But we don't know how to cook. You were supposed to handle the food. There it was. The truth they'd been dancing around for months. I wasn't invited to family gatherings as a loved relative. I was expected to handle the food while they enjoyed themselves. Uncle Vincent, there are literally thousands of cooking tutorials online. I have complete confidence in the family's ability to figure it out. At 5:30 p.m., I got a text from my mother with a photo of what appeared to be a very sad, very raw turkey surrounded by various failed side dishes. The caption read, "Please come help us. The family is hungry and nothing is working." I showed the photo to Beverly, who winced sympathetically. That's definitely not ready to eat. Are you sure you don't want to go help them? I've helped them for 20 years, I said. If they'd paid attention during any of those years, they'd know how to handle this. The final message of the day came at 7 p.m. from Kenneth. We ordered pizza. Everyone went home early. Thanks for ruining Thanksgiving, Juliana. Mom and Dad are devastated. I stared at that message for a long time. The accusation that I had ruined Thanksgiving by declining to work for free was exactly the kind of manipulation I expected. They couldn't conceive that their own lack of preparation and unrealistic expectations had created the disaster. That evening, as I helped Beverly's family clean up from a meal we had all prepared and enjoyed together, I felt lighter than I had in years. This was what holidays were supposed to feel like. Shared celebration, not solitary labor. The aftermath of Thanksgiving was swift and illuminating. My mother called Friday morning, her voice hoarse from what I assumed was a night of crying. Juliana, I need you to understand how humiliated we were yesterday. Uncle Vincent's girlfriend had heard so much about our wonderful holiday meals, and instead she saw us serving pizza from boxes. Grandmother Florence kept asking where you were, and we had to explain that you'd abandoned the family. Mom, I didn't abandon anyone. I chose to spend the holiday with people who value me as a person, not as unpaid kitchen staff. That's not how we see you. Then why, in 20 years, has no one ever learned to cook a basic holiday meal? Why has no one ever offered to take over hosting duties? Why do you call my cooking contributions helping out when I literally do everything? Silence. "I think we need to talk about Christmas," my mother said finally, her tone shifting to negotiation mode. "Maybe we could hire a caterer this year, and you could just come as a guest." The fact that hiring strangers seemed more reasonable than learning to cook themselves spoke volumes about how they viewed my past contributions. 20 years of my labor had been so completely taken for granted that they'd rather pay professionals than develop basic life skills. "Mom, I've already made Christmas plans. I'm spending the holiday with Beverly's family again." The phone call ended abruptly. Over the weekend, I heard through mutual friends that my family's Thanksgiving disaster had become neighborhood gossip. Apparently, the pizza delivery driver had arrived to find 20 confused adults standing around a raw turkey, and the story had spread quickly through their social circle. Kenneth's wife, Patricia, my sister-in-law, called on Sunday with a new strategy. "Juliana, I want to apologize for how we've taken your cooking for granted. I never realized how much work went into those meals. Would you consider teaching me some basic techniques before Christmas?" This was the first acknowledgement I'd received that my holiday contributions required skill and effort. It was also the first time anyone had expressed interest in learning, rather than simply expecting me to provide. "Patricia, I appreciate the apology, but I think this is something the whole family needs to work through together. I can't be your only backup plan for holiday hosting. What if we all took cooking classes? As a family?" The image of my entire family in matching aprons, learning knife skills together, was almost amusing enough to make me reconsider. Almost. "I think that's a wonderful idea for all of you. I hope you follow through with it." December passed peacefully. I worked on developing new recipes for the spring menu at North Peak Engineering and took a weekend trip to the coast with Beverly. For the first time in years, I approached Christmas without dread. No extensive shopping lists, no marathon cooking sessions, no aching feet and raw hands. My family made several more attempts to guilt me into resuming my holiday duties. They sent cards emphasizing how much I was missed. Though notably, these cards focused on missing my special touch in the kitchen, rather than missing my presence or conversation. On December 20th, my sister Patricia called with their final offer. "What if we paid you to cater Christmas dinner? We could hire you professionally." The fact that they would rather pay me as hired help than include me as an equal family member was the final confirmation I needed. I wasn't a daughter and sister who cooked. I was a cook who happened to be related to them. "Patricia, I'm not available for catering jobs during the holidays. I'm spending Christmas with my chosen family." Christmas morning arrived with unprecedented tranquility. I woke naturally around 8 a.m. instead of being jolted awake by pre-dawn alarms for turkey preparation. Beverly had invited me to Christmas brunch with her family, but the gathering wouldn't start until 11 a.m., a civilized hour that allowed for coffee, newspaper reading, and actual relaxation. As I sipped my coffee and watched snow fall gently outside my Portland apartment, my phone began its familiar holiday buzzing. But this time, instead of feeling obligated to respond, I felt empowered by my choice to ignore the chaos. The first call came from my mother at 9:30 a.m. "Juliana, please, we need your help. We tried to follow some online recipes, but nothing is turning out right. The ham glaze looks like soup, and the rolls are flat as pancakes. Everyone is arriving at noon expecting your usual feast." I listened to the entire voicemail, then deleted it. At 10:15 a.m., Kenneth called with barely contained panic in his voice. "Juliana, this is an emergency. Patricia, my wife, is crying because her souffle collapsed, and Sister Patricia burned the green beans again. Dad is trying to carve a ham with a butter knife because we can't find your good carving set. The kids are asking where Aunt Juliana's famous Christmas cookies are. You have to come save Christmas." The irony was palpable. For years they had acted as if I was easily replaceable, as if anyone could produce elaborate holiday meals with minimal effort. Now they were discovering that cooking required skill, planning, and experience, qualities they had dismissed as unimportant when I provided them freely. At Beverly's house, her family welcomed me with genuine warmth that had nothing to do with my culinary abilities. Beverly's mother, Helen, hugged me and said, "We're so glad you're here, dear. Beverly tells us you're going through a difficult time with your family, but their loss is our gain." This was what family felt like. People who were happy to see you walk through the door, not people who were only interested in what you could produce in their kitchen. As we prepared brunch together, Helen asked about my work, my hobbies, my thoughts on a book she'd recently read. Nobody asked me to solve their cooking problems or produce miracle meals on demand. By afternoon, the messages from my family had taken on an increasingly desperate tone. Photos arrived showing disasters that would have been comical if they weren't so telling. A ham covered in what appeared to be burnt honey and clumps of brown sugar. Dinner rolls that looked like hockey pucks. A turkey that was simultaneously overcooked on the outside and raw in the center. But the most revealing message came from Uncle Vincent at 2 p.m. "Juliana, your family is falling apart without you. Your mother is having what I think might be a panic attack. Kenneth is on the phone with every restaurant in town trying to find somewhere that's open on Christmas. The kids are hungry and cranky. How could you do this to us?" That message crystallized everything wrong with my family's perspective. The disaster unfolding in their kitchen wasn't something I was doing to them. It was the natural consequence of their own choices and assumptions. For 2 decades, they had chosen not to learn basic cooking skills because they assumed I would always be available to handle everything. They had chosen to treat me as hired help, rather than including me as an equal family member. My absence wasn't the problem. Their complete dependence on my unpaid labor was the problem. At 3 p.m., I received a group text with a photo of my entire family sitting around the dining room table, eating what appeared to be sandwiches and potato chips from paper plates. The elegant Christmas china sat unused on the sideboard because they had no worthy meal to serve on it. Beverly found me looking at this photo and gently took my phone away. "They're learning an important lesson," she said. "Sometimes people need to experience consequences before they can understand the value of what they've taken for granted." She was right. This wasn't revenge, it was education. My family was finally discovering what Christmas preparation actually required, and more importantly, they were learning what they had lost when they chose to treat me as a service provider, rather than a beloved family member. The aftermath of that Christmas disaster created ripple effects that extended far beyond one ruined holiday meal. Robert and Diana faced months of social embarrassment as word spread through their church and neighborhood about their complete inability to host even a basic family gathering without their daughter's unpaid labor. Their reputation as gracious hosts, built entirely on my unacknowledged work, crumbled when friends and extended family witnessed them serving peanut butter sandwiches on Christmas Day. Kenneth and Patricia lost significant credibility when their own children began asking uncomfortable questions about why they had never learned to cook and why they had expected Aunt Juliana to work alone in the kitchen during every family celebration. Uncle Vincent and other relatives started declining invitations to future gatherings, knowing that the elaborate meals they had enjoyed for years were no longer guaranteed. The family's holiday traditions permanently changed as they struggled with basic cooking tasks they had taken for granted, while their social standing suffered when people learned they had treated their own daughter and sister as unpaid kitchen staff, rather than appreciating her generous contributions as acts of love. Sitting in my peaceful apartment that evening, surrounded by thoughtful gifts from Beverly's family and leftovers from a meal we had all prepared together with joy and laughter, I realized that my decision to step away from my family's exploitation had taught me the profound difference between people who value your presence and those who only value your services, and that sometimes the most generous gift we can give ourselves is the freedom to choose how we spend our precious time with people who truly cherish us. Looking back on my journey from unpaid family chef to empowered woman who chose her own holiday celebrations, I understood that my revenge had been nothing more than refusing to participate in my own exploitation. And sometimes that simple act of self-respect creates the most powerful transformation of all.